Hey, what's up, everybody out there? Thank you once again for tuning into another episode of Fantasy First here at the High Stakes Sports Debates Network. My name is Tom Jude. I'll be your host for today. Obviously, you guys have already noticed that there is no video for today's episode. Unfortunately, I had a little bit of a malfunction with my camera, so I'm trying to get that fixed, but I still wanted to get some content out to you guys before the Sunday game. So thank you guys once again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Had a little bit of a bad luck situation going on with the Thursday night games. Can't believe Ruben Randle did that. Who would have expected it? It really was on like a fluky sort of the ball bounced off of a shoulder pad and I'm going to catch it and run it to the house. So don't feel bad if you benched Ruben Randle. That's just how it goes. But getting into today's show, I want to quickly run through the matchups with you guys. Guys, you should start, sit, get everybody ready for that because today is going to be a very interesting week 3 in the NFL. So let's talk about some of these matchups. Let's start with the Bengals and Ravens. Clearly, let's talk about your studs. You're starting AJ Green. You probably used a high investment on him, so he'll be in your starting lineup. Jeremy Hill owners, I'm a little bit scared. I'm not jumping off the ship yet because I'm still unsold that I'm still not sold that Gio Bernard can stay healthy for a full season with the frame and size that he possesses. So you got to start Hill in a PPR. You're starting Bernard. You're starting both those guys unless you have better matchups. Me personally, I'm starting Gio Bernard maybe over a guy like Frank Gore who hasn't really shown very well. Eventually, though, you got to think those Colts will get out of those sluggish games. I mean, you don't have to play the Bills and the Jets every week, so I got to think at some point Frank Gore is going to get it going here. My one worry with Frank Gore, not to veer away from this Bengals-Ravens matchup real quick, but, he's not being used in the pass game, and, that was one thing. People who picked up Ahmad Bradshaw last year and were rewarded with a top 15 PPR play before he went down, he was getting catches and he was getting in the end zone. You're not really seeing that with Frank Gore. So, Bengals, Ravens, AJ Green's on the start for you guys. I think in this divisional matchup, I'm going to avoid Andy Dalton if I've got better options. You don't get the luxury of playing a Raiders defense and, every week to be able to put up those massive fantasy points. This is a team that still wants to get it done on the ground, and if I've got better options, I'm definitely starting them over Andy Dalton. Moving on, and obviously Tyler Eifert. So at this point, with him getting in the end zone 3 times in the last 2 weeks, he's an every week must start. You cannot bench Tyler Eifert unless, of course, you just happen to also draft Kelsey and you happen to also draft Gronkowski. So, as for the Ravens, again, if you're in deep leagues, I think Joe Flacco is an interesting start. In a deeper league, you might have to. Steve Smith, you have to trot out there if you've got better options because you went with 2 elite receivers when your draft. Okay, I'm fine with benching Steve Smith. He did have a good game against Oakland last week, but again, same for the Bengals. You don't get to play against the Oakland Raiders on a weekly basis. So, again, you paid the high price for Justin Forsett. You got to go out there and trot him out. Just keep in mind that Lorenzo Taliaferro will continue to spell Justin Forsett. You're not going to get the 3rd or high 2nd round investment that you're not going to get that return. I think you're looking at a return of 4th to 5th round value this year for Justin Forsett. As for the rest of the Ravens offense, Crockett Gilmore is another interesting DFS stream or in a regular season-long league. A nice stream this week. I mean, did you see how he bulldozed his way in the end zone against Raiders last week? And I understand that it's the Raiders, but when there's 3 professionally paid NFL defenders trying to tackle you and you still muscle your way into the end zone, people are going to start looking at you and thinking, whoa, okay, this guy can play. So I think Crockett Gilmore is another streamer that you can potentially find yourself getting in the end zone with against this Bengals defense today. Guys, I'm sitting in this matchup. I'm not going anywhere near Marvin Jones. I think he had one nice play again, but he's just not getting the targets that he needs to be a, consistent fantasy producer. If you're in a 14-plus league, though, and you need a flex start, I can potentially see it just because we know the coverage is going to go to A.J. Green's way. As for the Ravens, it's tough. I'm not starting Kamar Aiken. Like I said, I'm only starting Steve Smith if I have to. If I've got better options, I'm going with them. I like Crockett Gilmore as a stream. If I've got other options than Joe, I'm going with those other options. Raiders, Browns. Derek Carr going up against a tough secondary. If I've got better options this week, I'm going with that. Same with Amari Cooper. I think both of those guys are benches. I'm going to bench both those guys this week personally if I've got better options. Maybe I've got a Phillip Rivers, a Cam Newton going against the Saints, a Matt Ryan there. While, yes, I like the future of Derek Carr, he's yet to be a consistent fantasy producer. So I'm going to bench him this week against that secondary, especially on the road. Latavius Murray, I'm starting. He's had 18 touches. He's averaged 18 touches the last 2 weeks. He is the workhorse in Oakland, guys, and it's time to start treating him like that. Crabtree could be interesting. He'll be the number 2 receiver. You know that this team is going to try to take away Amari Cooper out of that passing game. So if there's any wide receiver I'm starting, it could be Crabtree. But again, I don't feel safe there. And again, that's when we talk about these guys, these number 2 options. I mean, these are in deeper leagues. If you're in a 10-man league, 12-man league, you're starting your studs. You're not going out there trotting out Michael Crabtree. This is for 14-plus leagues, maybe 3 wide receiver leagues that I consider starting guys like Michael Crabtree. As for the Cleveland Browns, Josh McCown's back under center. Again, why in the world is Manziel not out there? I mean, listen, I understand that, the coach feels like you want to go with the veteran, but at a certain point, you got to see what you have in Johnny Manziel, or am I just crazy? I mean, you have to see what you have in this kid. He looked pretty good last week, and I get it, against a really young, inexperienced, talentless Tennessee Titans football team, but what are you doing, Coach? That's the question I have for you. So as for the Browns, there's not a lot of guys here that I want to start outside of Isaiah Crowell. I'm really just kind of avoiding that team altogether. So moving on to the Saints-Panthers, I'm not starting. I don't care how deep of a league you are with Luke McCown. I avoid him. I think the start for me in this week on this team is C.J. Spiller. This could be a team that could fall behind / their backup quarterback. It might be dump off City there in going to play against the Panthers today. So Brandon Cooks, I'm hesitant to start. I'll be honest with you. Until he shows it, until we see the boom, I got to sit Brandon Cooks. Ingram's probably a start. Keep in mind, this team is going to get the boxes stacked against them. There's no threat with Drew Brees on the bench because of the shoulder injury. With Brandon Cooks and without Jimmy Graham, clearly this Panthers team will try and focus to stop the run. So as for the Carolina Panthers, me personally, I'm starting Cam. I have Cam in a league, and the debate for me was Cam Newton and Tyrod Taylor. Maybe you guys disagree, but I am going to go with Cam Newton here. As for you have to start Greg Olsen. I think Jonathan Stewart's a flex option, a solid one. Listen, he's gotten the volume all year, and he's stayed healthy thus far. At some point, you got to think that Stewart is going to bust one. Cam Newton running around is going to help those run lanes open eventually. Stay patient with Stewart. As long as he's healthy, the volume will be there, because we've seen that Cameron Artis-Payne, who's second on the depth chart, as I think he's got, 5 carries this entire season? Don't quote me on that number, but yeah. Falcons, Cowboys. You're starting your studs on the Falcons. Tevin Coleman's going to play, but I think that what's his name? Devontae Freeman is definitely going to be the start, I think, at running back there. I'm benching Roddy White. I just think Leonard Hankerson's ascending his way to being that team's number 2 receiver. Cowboys, if Jason Witten plays, I think he's a viable start in the PPR. Obviously, you're starting Joseph Randle. While this Cowboys team might face stacked boxes because of the lack of Dez, your number 1 receiver is Terrence Williams, who could be a sneaky start. But keep in mind, this Atlanta defense is sneaky good. They're 2-0, so I think the only guys I'm starting on Dallas this week are the running backs, Joseph Randle, and the tight end, Jason Witten. Now, I think it could be a sneaky DFS play to trot out Gavin Escobar. He might find his way in the end zone, but I'm not starting him in a fantasy, in a season-long fantasy, and I'm not starting Brandon Weeden. Buccaneers, Texans. I think Winston's a decent spot start here. Maybe you went super ultra value at quarterback. I think Winston's a good start here. Mike Evans might finally break out today. We know how bad this Texans team has been against the pass. Doug Martin might get bottled up a little bit against that Texans run D, but if I got better options, maybe a Danny Woodhead, maybe one of those pass catchers, a CJ Spiller, I'm starting them over Martin. However, if I went super wide receiver and heavy quarterback play and I don't have a lot of running back, I think that Martin is a serviceable high-end RB3 start this week. Vincent Jackson, also a decent start. I'm not super comfortable, I'll put it that way, but again, maybe I went running back heavy. I've got Gronk. I think Vincent Jackson's a solid streamer and a solid DFS play at value. As for the Texans, again, the only guy I'm starting is DeAndre Hopkins. Everybody else, I'm not comfortable with Houston. Colts, Titans, Andrew Luck. This offensive line and this team can't get any worse than playing the Bills and the Jets. I'm starting Luck. I'm starting Dante Moncrief. Basically, your weapons. The one guy I'm on the fence with is Andre Johnson. Is he going to burn me? Because I feel like sitting him, but now that he's not playing the Jets or the Bills, is this the week that Andre Johnson shows something? Until he does, I have to bench him, and I could be wrong about that this week. But if he shows up next week, at least this week, at least we know going forward, it was because of those two early dominant defenses as to why Andre Johnson couldn't get it going. For the Titans, if you need a spot start with Mariota, go ahead, go for it. I think Kendall Wright's a nice play this week if you have him. Dorial Green-Beckham, while I don't think that there's going to be a lot of volume there, I think he's a solid touchdown guy. Could have 8 to 10 points strictly because he gets in the end zone. Although I'm not advocating you start him, I'm saying in super deep leagues, 3 wide receiver leagues, he could be a flex at best if he gets into the end zone. Bishop Sankey on the ground. If I got better options, I'm going with them. He bursted out week 2 and then week 1 and then he disappeared week 2. So I got to stay away there. Jaguars, Patriots. Obviously, every Patriot you're starting, including Dion Lewis. As for that's all that needs to be said. Moving on for the Jaguars, I think Bortles is an interesting play this week. We saw what Tyrod Taylor was able to do. However, I am a little bit worried about the turnovers. If you got better options, go for it. If you waited to round 9-10 to get your quarterback, I think that Blake Bortles is an interesting stream option. Allen Robinson, after last week, has now become an every week start until he just enters an ice age type of cold streak. TJ Yeldon, I'm starting with the injury to shoelace Denard Robinson. He'll get the volume there. Allen Hurns is interesting in deeper leagues or DFS, but me personally, in terms of like a season-long commitment, I'm not starting Allen Hurns. Moving on, Chargers, Vikings, AP, you're starting. That's all that needs to be said there. As for these receivers, I think Charles Johnson will eventually get it going. Someone's got to catch passes from Teddy Bridgewater. Kyle Rudolph could be another interesting option. I think he's touchdown dependent, but he could have another touchdown this week against a Chargers secondary that has not covered the tight end well. If I had to choose between Charles Johnson and Mike Wallace this week, I'm choosing Charles Johnson. Moving on, and if you've got better options, if you use a high-round pick on a quarterback, you can start him over Bridgewater. But I like Bridgewater as a start this week to get 20-plus points again. Not like 29, but I think he's a solid quarterback to start. As for the Chargers, you start Rivers, even though his numbers against the Vikings aren't that good last time I checked. Keenan Allen could see Xavier Rhodes. I think that Ladarius Green, if he plays, I don't know if he's playing, if the concussion got to him. I actually didn't check that, so I could be wrong if he might not even be on the field, but if he is, I think he's a solid start. Stevie Johnson has become an every week start on this offense. Go ahead and start Stevie Johnson. As for the running game, Woodhead almost again an every week start in PPR. Gordon finally got it going on the ground game. If you've used Melvin Gordon as your first running back because you went Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, maybe you got a quarterback in round 3, I think Gordon is an interesting start. Don't expect him to win you your week, but he's a guy that could provide you with 7 to 15 points. Eagles, Jets. I'm benching every Eagle this week. I'm so scared. I could be terribly wrong. I'm not starting Bradford. I have Jordan Matthews in a Dynasty League, but I'll be honest with you guys, I'm really worried about that start. I'm actually starting C.J. Anderson ahead of him. I'm either going to look really stupid or really smart for that one. We're going to find out. Because I'll be honest with you guys, I've been overthinking myself a lot lately, and it's cost me in a couple leagues. So, as for the Jets, if Chris Ivory plays, I start him. Marshall's an every week start. Decker is out, and I'm a little worried about Fitzpatrick. I think he could be a solid stream, maybe get you 18 to 20, but again, we looked. Marshall bailed him out of a turnover week 1 by stripping the ball away from one of those Brown defenders. I think he's a risky bet, but overall, if I can find better options, I do. Steelers, Rams. You're starting all of your Steelers. Just get them out there if you have to. Bell is finally back. I get the Rams front 4 is intimidating, but this is a guy who also gets work done in the pass game. As for the Rams, I think Nick Foles is a sneaky spot start this week. Could get you 20 to 22 points. I like Kenny Britt again, potentially getting in the end zone. As for this running game, if you have to start Gurley, do it, but I bench him for another week. I don't think he's going to receive a full workload. This is a guy who's going to get spelled in on occasion and eased into the game. They're not just going to throw this kid out to the fire. Be honest with you, I'm not starting any Rams running back because I just don't know who it's going to be this week. San Francisco 49ers at Cardinals. I'm starting all my Cardinals. I said to start Chris Johnson last week. Totally wrong. I'll raise my hand and accept that. He did get the 20 carries, so the volume was there, but David Johnson's now the guy going forward. He just looks too explosive. So many touchdowns on like these random plays that he just takes the ball and scores. So David Johnson is the running back start there. I like John Brown to finally bust out this week. This is a 49ers team that gave up a lot of big plays, and their secondary is not intimidating anymore. We'll see if this San Francisco team is the team that showed up on Monday night, but I'm betting the opposite. They lost a lot on defense, and the Cardinals are at home. As for the Niners, it's going to be tough. I think Carlos Hyde gets bottled up this week. I'm not starting him personally. I think he's a bench for me. Colin Kaepernick could rack up the running yards in garbage time, and I think he's actually in the top 5 in fantasy points. So if that's your starter, go out there and trot him out and bank on the rushing yards. But I don't expect Torrey Smith and their other receiver whose name's escaping me right now. I don't think Anquan Bolden. I don't think those guys are legitimate starts. If I had to start one of those guys, it's probably Bolden in a PPR, but I'm just very underwhelmed with the Niners right now, and I don't see many great starts ahead. Bills, Dolphins. I'm benching Tyrod this week, guys. Not going to lie to you. Like I said, I like the Cam matchup because those are my 2 quarterbacks in that league. Let me know in the comment section below who you would start because I want to hear what you guys think too. Shady McCoy's a start. Sammy Watkins doesn't have good career numbers against the Dolphins, but this is a different team with a different quarterback. If you drafted him high to be your wide receiver 1, maybe 2, you might start him. But I might start guys like John Brown, maybe guys like Brandon Marshall, or, guys Stevie Johnson. Those are all plays I think that I would personally play over Sammy Watkins this week. Dolphins, all those people that use that high pick on Lamar Miller, it's looking like a potential bust. And with this match against the Bills, who are angry after getting destroyed by Brady, I personally bench Lamar Miller. Tannehill, I think, is a start, though. I mean, I just don't think that this Dolphins team is going to have much success on the ground against the Bills. Jarvis Landry has assumed his role as an every week start as Ryan Tannehill's boyfriend forever. You have to start Jarvis Landry. In a PPR, he's almost already assumed wide receiver 1 status. So, Kenny Stills has looked horrible. I think Rashard Matthews is a decent start later in deeper leagues while this team is patient to move along the development of Devontae Parker. I'm staying away from that running game of the Dolphins. Now with Jonas Gray being promoted from the practice squad, it looks like it'll be an RBBC. Bears Seahawks. I'm starting all my Seahawks. That's it. Well, my major players, Lynch, Wilson, Graham. I think in a DFS play, I think that Jermaine Kearse could be interesting this week. He might see 5 to 6 targets, maybe get in the end zone, but in year-long leagues, obviously I've got other options than Jermaine Kearse, but I'm starting Wilson, Lynch, Graham. Apparently there's talk too about Wilson or about Lynch potentially not playing. If that's the case, Fred Jackson's an interesting start as well. For the Bears, I'm not starting anybody but Forte. And I think that's all that needs to be said, and I think all you guys agree. As for the Sunday night matchup, you're starting all your Broncos. It seems that Peyton Manning and Gary Kubiak are fighting for offensive supremacy. Who's going to be the guy to really kind of call the plays, and it just doesn't look like it's working under center right now for Manning. I think Manning will win out, especially when you're paying the guy $16 million. You start Peyton Manning, you start Emmanuel Sanders, you start Demaryius Thomas. As for this run game, I think C.J. Anderson might bounce back tonight, folks. I'm not saying he's the RB1 of old, but I think a 10 to 15 point day is most certainly possible against a Lions team that has given up the most rushing yards to opposing running backs. As for the Lions, listen, I'm not a big fan of Stafford in this matchup, but I think Calvin could potentially see his 10 targets. I start Calvin Johnson. I start Amir Abdullah. It's going to be tough, though, with Stafford behind that line against this Broncos defense. I'm just not sold on Stafford. I bench him against that Broncos defense that has looked pretty good, but it's hard to bench a guy like Calvin Johnson. Amir Abdullah, I think, is an interesting start. This is a team that can fall behind, and Amir Abdullah could just get a lot of screen work. Sneaky, though, that Theo Riddick was in 2-minute offenses, though, last week, so could be a bargain bin DFS guy as well. Chiefs-Packers Monday night. I'm starting all my Packers. Listen, with Eddie Lacy, it's going to be real interesting to see how that looks going forward. I'm just a little hesitant on starting him because you don't want to wait till Monday and then he's ruled out or he just looks sluggish, but you know that James Starks is going to get spelled in this week more than ever. I get that Lacy has the extra week, but what are you going to do? I think Alex Smith, moving to the Chiefs, I think Alex Smith's a solid quarterback, too, with QB1 upside this week against the Packers. I think he could run around a little bit, get the ball to Travis Kelce, maybe a couple screens to Charles that go for big plays. I think Alex Smith is a startable quarterback. You're starting Charles, you're starting Kelce. Macklin is on the fringe. I think in a PPR, you start him this week. I think it's a good matchup. So that's the show for you guys. Just wanted to run through the matchups. Again, I'm really sorry for not having video this week, guys. I'll make sure that the camera is fully functional and ready to go next week. So I appreciate you guys joining the show or watching the show. If you guys want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at SportsDebateTom. You can ask any questions from now until game time or comment in the section below because I will get a notification. I will be able to answer your question right away. Please, I also want to start answering people's questions on the show. So please, I beg of you, send me your questions so we can talk about them on the show. Also, check out the podcast that's on highstakesportsdebates.wordpress.com. It's more of a recap of Week 3, getting you set for Week 4, and the videos for Thursday Night Football and Sunday Night Football will return to their regularly scheduled times next week. So thank you guys so much for listening to the show. And again, if you have any other questions, you know how to contact me. So have a great day, guys, and good luck to all your fantasy teams out there. We'll see you next time here at High Stakes Sports Debates. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. High Stakes Sports Debates.